The Muslim Conquests, 632, 750 AD. The lightning that changed the world. In less than a century, they rose from the desert and built an empire greater than Rome. Between 632 and 750 AD, a revolution unlike any other swept across the known world. In just one lifetime, tribes of Arabia, poor, divided, and overlooked, forged one of the largest empires in human history, stretching from Spain to India. This was not merely conquest by the sword. It was a transformation, religious, political, and cultural, that redrew the map of civilization. This is the story of the Muslim conquests, how the successors of the Prophet Muhammad changed the world forever. The spark in the desert, 610-632 AD. It began in Arabia, a harsh land of sand and tribes, where survival depended on loyalty, trade, and faith in ancient gods. In the city of Mecca, a merchant named Muhammad ibn Abdullah claimed a revelation that there was no God but Allah, and that he was his messenger. His message shattered the old order. He preached equality, charity, and submission to one God, threatening the power of Mecca's pagan elites. They fought him, expelled him, and hunted his followers. In 622 AD, Muhammad fled to Medina, an event called the Hijra, marking the birth of the Islamic calendar. From Medina, he built not just a faith, but a state. He united the tribes under one banner, the Ummah, a community of believers, bound not by blood, but by faith. By the time of his death in 632 AD, Muhammad had united all of Arabia. The desert that once divided men now bound them together under a single creed. And his final words were not of empire, but of mission. Convey from me, even if it is one verse. His followers took that command literally, and to the ends of the earth. 2. The first caliphs. The age of the rightly guided, 632 or 661 AD. When Muhammad died, his followers faced a question that would define history. Who would lead the believers now? They chose Abu Bakr, his close companion, as the first caliph, successor of the messenger of God. But Arabia was far from stable. Tribes rebelled, refusing to pay taxes or accept authority. Abu Bakr crushed these uprisings in what became known as the Ridda Wars, the Wars of Apostasy. By 633, the Arabian Peninsula was united again, this time permanently. And then, as if moved by destiny, the Muslims turned outward, the call beyond Arabia. At that moment, the great powers of the world, Byzantium and Persia, were exhausted. They had just finished fighting each other in a brutal 26-year war that left both empires crippled. Armies were scattered, treasuries empty, cities burned. Against this backdrop of weakness, the Arabs emerged like a storm. They had no navy, no siege engines, no empire, only faith, discipline, and the fire of conviction. Abu Bakr sent his generals north. Khalid ibn al-Walid, the Sword of God, led the charge, a military genius whose speed and tactics became legendary. He once marched his men across the Syrian desert without water, breaking the Byzantine defenses where no army dared to go. In 636 AD, his forces met the Byzantines at Yarmouk, near the Golan Heights. The battle lasted 6 days. When it ended, the Byzantine army was annihilated. It was one of the most decisive victories in history. Syria, and soon after Palestine, fell to the Muslims. In the same year, another army struck east. At Qadisiyyah, the Muslims faced the might of the Sassanid Persian Empire. War elephants thundered across the battlefield. The Persians outnumbered the Arabs 3-1. But faith proved the stronger weapon. After days of chaos, the Persian lines broke, and their empire began to crumble. Within a few years, Ctesiphon, the Persian capital, fell. The once great empire of Cyrus and Darius was no more. The Caliphate had replaced it. Umar ibn al-Khattab, builder of empire, 634–644 AD. After Abu Bakr's death, his successor, Umar ibn al-Khattab, transformed the conquests into an empire. He was a man of iron will and simple dress, sleeping on straw mats, walking barefoot through the streets of Medina. Yet he ruled over the fastest-growing empire the world had ever seen. Under Umar, Muslim armies conquered Jerusalem, Egypt, Persia, and Mesopotamia. He introduced a system of governance that blended justice with discipline. Conquered lands were taxed, but not destroyed. Local faiths were tolerated. Administration was decentralized but loyal to the Caliph. When Jerusalem surrendered peacefully in 637 AD, Umar refused to pray inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, fearing future generations might turn it into a mosque. Instead, he prayed outside, setting an example of restraint and coexistence. By 644 AD, the Islamic Empire stretched from Libya to the Indus River, larger than Alexander's ever was. And yet Umar still wore patched clothes. He was assassinated by a Persian slave, but by then his name was already immortal. 4. The Caliph Uthman and the Seeds of Division, 644–656 AD. After Umar came Uthman ibn Affan, under whose reign the empire's frontiers pushed further. His greatest achievement was the standardization of the Quran, ensuring that the words of Muhammad would be preserved forever. But success brought new challenges. As the empire grew, wealth flooded into Arabia. Old tribal rivalries resurfaced. Accusations of corruption, nepotism, and favoritism spread. Rebellions broke out. And in 656 AD, Uthman was murdered in Medina. The unity of Islam shattered. The next caliph, Ali ibn Abi Talib, cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet, faced open rebellion. Muslims fought Muslims for the first time in history. The first fitna, or civil war, had begun. Though Ali was revered for his wisdom and justice, he was assassinated in 661 AD. With his death, the age of the rightly guided caliphs ended, and a new dynasty rose. The Umayyad Revolution, 661–750 AD. The next rulers were the Umayyads, based in Damascus. Ambitious, organized, and imperial. They transformed the Islamic State from a community into a global empire. Under Muawiyah the Free, the first Umayyad caliph, the administration was centralized. Arabic became the language of government, and a navy was built that challenged Byzantium in the Mediterranean. Within decades, the Muslim armies crossed continents. Expansion west into Africa and Spain. In North Africa, generals like Uqba ibn Nafi and Musa ibn Nusayr marched through the Sahara, founding the city of Kairouan and spreading Islam among the Berber tribes. By the early 8th century, the Muslim frontier reached the Atlantic Ocean, the western edge of the known world. From there, the conquests leapt across the sea. In 711 AD, a Berber general named Tariq ibn Ziyad landed in Spain with 7,000 men. He burned his ships, declaring, "Behind you is the sea, before you is the enemy. There is no escape but victory." At the Battle of Guadalete, the Visigothic king, Roderick, was defeated and killed. Within a few years, most of the Iberian Peninsula was under Muslim rule. The conquerors called it Al-Andalus, a land of learning, art, and coexistence that would last for centuries. Expansion east to the heart of Asia. Meanwhile, in the east, Muslim armies crossed the Hindu Kush into India, defeating the Rajput kingdoms and reaching the Sindh River. Others pressed north into Central Asia, confronting the Turks and capturing Samarkand and Bukhara, ancient cities that became centers of Islamic culture. By 750 AD, the Caliphate stretched from Spain to the borders of China, encompassing more than half of the civilized world. It was the largest contiguous empire since Rome, achieved in barely a century. 6. The battle for Constantinople. The Umayyads even dreamed of taking the greatest prize of all, Constantinople, the Queen of Cities. Between 674 and 718 AD, Muslim fleets and armies besieged the Byzantine capital multiple times. But the city held, saved by its massive walls and a mysterious weapon known as Greek fire, a flaming liquid that burned even on water. Though the Muslims failed to take Constantinople, the attempt marked their ambition, not just to rule the land, but to challenge history itself. Why they won and what they brought. How did a people from the desert defeat two ancient empires in a generation? Historians point to several reasons, but the most powerful was belief. The Muslims fought not for plunder, but for purpose. They believed themselves part of a divine mission, to bring justice and unity to a fractured world. They practiced equality among believers, attracted converts through tolerance and simplicity, and built an administration that respected local customs. Christian and Jewish communities, called dhimmis, were allowed to keep their faith in exchange for a small tax. To many, life under the Caliphate was more stable and fair than under their old rulers. The empire became not only a military force but a cultural revolution, preserving Greek knowledge, advancing science, mathematics, and architecture. From Damascus to Cordoba, from Cairo to Baghdad, cities flourished with trade, art, and intellect. The desert tribes had become the torchbearers of civilization. 8. The fall of the Umayyads and the birth of the Abbasids, 750 AD. But all empires rise on unity and fall to ambition. By the mid-8th century, resentment grew against the Umayyads. Many believed they had become too worldly, abandoning the ideals of Islam for luxury and power. In 750 AD, a rebellion erupted in Khorasan, led by the descendants of Muhammad's uncle, Abbas ibn Abd al-Muttalib. The Abbasid revolution swept across the empire, toppling the Umayyads. A new dynasty arose, moving the capital east to Baghdad, which would soon become the jewel of the Islamic world. The surviving Umayyads fled west, establishing a new state in Spain, where their descendants would rule Al-Andalus for centuries. The age of conquest was over, but the age of civilization had begun. 9. Legacy of the conquests. The Muslim conquests changed the course of history more profoundly than perhaps any other expansion. They ended the old order of Rome and Persia, replaced polytheism with monotheism across half the world, and forged a cultural bridge between East and West. Arabic became the language of science, medicine, and philosophy. From algebra to astronomy, from poetry to architecture, the Islamic world carried the knowledge of ancient Greece and India into the Middle Ages. The conquests also created the world's first truly global civilization, stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific, united by trade, law, and faith. And yet, for all their speed and power, the Muslim conquests were not just about empire. They were about transformation of hearts, minds, and worlds. X. Epilogue. From desert to destiny. In 632 AD, Arabia was a scattered land of tribes. By 750 AD, it had birthed an empire that defined an era. In a single century, nomads became rulers, merchants became scholars, and faith became civilization. The Muslim conquests were more than military victories. They were a turning point in human history, when a message born in the silence of the desert reshaped the destiny of continents. They came from the sands, wrote a Byzantine chronicler, and they left behind cities of gold. The world that emerged would forever remember their rise and never be the same again.